one then wonders why, you know, you can have Jacques Derrida come to the Louvre and do a show on blindness, and that's great. But why are people like Derrida, who was a serious thinker, why are they not working in museums for the whole of their careers? You know, that's the problem. Because it's all very well to rely on scholars from outside and to collaborate with scholars from outside museums, but the museums themselves, I believe, have to get to a place where they can support that kind of scholarship on that level, dealing with big ideas, as indeed Derrida did.
The Rijksmuseum doesn't collect contemporary art, so I leave it to you. But I think that and that's also a little bit talking about the way you present collection catalogues. I see the museum as a keeper of objects. I see it as a keeper of knowledge. I also see it as a generator of knowledge. And our collection is is so vast that we will not to be able to, or we shouldn't generate that knowledge on our own. I think we kept these objects for many years, for many generations, but we should also build the knowledge together with the public. And I think that that's also the approach that we've taken, which means that you do stimulate, you do have object-based research in the museum, but you also invite researchers and people who keep knowledge to bring it to the museum. And I think that that's, again, from this idea of it's everybody's collection, so you should not tell the world how things are. You give a possibility to interact. And the whole discussion on different departments, yes, we were 3 different museums and we consolidated them. I think that interdisciplinary research is very important, but you can only do interdisciplinary research when you have a discipline. So that's not fair.
I wonder also if one of the problems is training, because I think that if curators from older generations were taught in very specific ways in conventional art history departments that were perhaps less informed by other disciplines than those who are coming now, maybe something can happen in a generational shift where students are learning differently, and they will bring those kinds of skills and thinking to their jobs in museums. I mean, I think it would be actually very interesting to see whether or not there's a kind of filter of change that happens because students who are trained differently become curators.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but it's not confined to art museums. And of course, our institution is concerned with material culture as a whole, which includes stuffed wombats as well as Chippendale chairs. So we also have to think about how that argument plays out in the context of other kinds of museums other than art museums. And I think it's equally the case in terms of education of curators in other kind of non-art museums, but it's also limited.
Could I just make a couple comments? One, I just want to make the point that our digital catalog is not a replacement for visiting the museum. I mean, this is an attempt to rectify a situation where we have these scholarly catalogs that we want to publish, to disseminate, but our last scholarly catalog had a print run of 1,300. So very few institutions have the catalog physically, and the fact that we've already had 6,500 unique viewers to see our catalog is pretty remarkable for us. So but it's in no way a substitute for visiting the museum, seeing the objects, but it's a way for us to disseminate the information worldwide that we couldn't do otherwise, especially with this archival information, such as labels on the verso. And I think, in terms of working interdisciplinarily, we have, as I explained, we worked a lot with other computer programmers, but throughout the course of the project, we've investigated many avenues of investigating other parts of the physicality of our pictures, and we've worked with computer engineers who are developing software. And it becomes kind of an exchange. They are interested in developing the software. We have the pictures that might help validate their software, and so we're finding these amazing collaborations across disciplines. And who knew we'd be working with industrial engineers to do these kinds of things? So I think these things are happening. It's just a matter of opening up the dialogue and finding oftentimes compatible personalities and projects.
I would just add, just very quickly, that Ivan Gaskell mentioned that no single, which I hasten to agree, no single artifact reveals all of its, or object reveals all of its aspects in any one setting or any one context. And from your question, it seems now is a good time to think about digital artifacts, why that isn't an oxymoron. It sounds like one initiative. And to start recontextualizing digital artifacts in a way that now shows aspects present and concealed in this field now. Yeah, that's a nice connection.
Yeah.
Thought that there was a question in the back? No? Anyone else? The one, yes, please.
Might I suggest, therefore, given these wonderful comments about tangibility, intangibility, and what we're getting into here, the virtual and the real, the object and the non-object and such, is it not the case, therefore, that really we're still hanging a little bit too much onto, well, we've had lots of talk, haven't we, about, dualistic thinking, and it's still built in here. And in fact, the tendency in what you've shown us is to put that to one side. To have a museum which, yes, has objects, but also embraces discussion, debate, provocation, the act of intervention. Yes, with things, but it's actually breaking down that thing world, non-thing world. They're actually coincident. When I'm lucky enough to both work with academics, but also engineers, and I find it humanistic, academics and engineers, and I find it quite ironic that among humanists I hear a celebration that, yes, we're dealing now with materialities and things. Isn't that great? And I find among engineers quite the opposite. It's now great that we're really moving forward with human-centered design, where we can do interaction design, experience design, where the object is actually dispersing into these melange of people and things, where one can become the other and exchange properties, such that in fact the radical distinctions that in fact lie institutionally behind our museums and academies are actually, in the real world, breaking down. So the question is this not an institutional problem? I think, Ivan, you were kind of saying that.
Yeah, I think it is an institutional problem. And I think we need to have some concerted effort to reconsider where the thingness of a thing lies, and whether we should give a particular privilege to what I would call the prototype. This is the prototype of this particular instantiation of pencil. I could make a digital photograph of that and put it on the web. Is that any less an aspect of this than the prototype? So where is there does one have to give primacy to the prototype? I don't think necessarily.
No,
But this is a big philosophical
I think
issue.
that we maybe in our museum are incredibly practical in the sense that we are linked to material, and that can be either on a computer or not. But the objects are and that's what I tried to say as well in my talk. That I felt that the objects are what distinguishes us, and our collections what distinguishes us from other institutions, from other research institutions, etc., etc. And I think that if you take away the boundary to an object-based research and general research on the materiality or non-materiality of things, then you also take away what distinguishes museums from other institutions. And why would you want to do that? I mean, why is that something our public wants? They come objects, or is it? I think that it's.
Maybe it's
I think that you try to see what what are we good at. That's one of the things, and also we use those objects, and we give in a way that our generation maybe does now, but we also have been tasked to preserve them for the future, because future generations might do something completely different. And I think that we shouldn't have a kind of we shouldn't try to push away from that the objects that we have to respect and keep.
Maybe it isn't zero sum though. Maybe it's not taking away, but adding. You're actually adding to the object by taking all this into account. It's not just saying you're not doing
I don't think that we don't. I think that yes, you add, but you also have to make choices in what type of research you do, because you can't do everything. But I think that if other institutions, and that's where I agree with you, we invite others to do research on the objects, also because they can add to it. But I think that in a museum you have to make your choices.
Can you say something about the prototype question?
Well, the prototype question, 3D printing and many other methods of reproduction have completely mooted the difference between prototype and series. So it's the last kind of wall, the last construct of this philosophical discussion physically has come to disappear. So it's quite interesting. You know, MoMA, the design collection at MoMA used to be that we would only collect production pieces, so no prototypes, no models. You know, we would break that rule every now and then, but it was really about art in the real world. And so we also predilect, for instance, the Volkswagen Beetle. Of course, being MoMA, we could have had a model from before the Second World War with a split windshield, historically relevant, but instead we decided to have the 1959 one because that's the one that really was part of the 1960s, that was truly the people's car. So we used to make these distinctions, and now we don't do it anymore because the prototype and the series are the same, because sometimes in a single individual object there can be so much experimentation for the future. So the distinction becomes really value-based as opposed to material-based.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
And I would add to that, by the way, in terms of if anybody wanted to make a catalog of the contribution that philosophy could make to this kind of work, another category would be from this suggestion. Philosophers have been talking a lot lately about what they call the boundary conditions of an action, and the reason they do that is because they're working in ethics, trying to figure out where an action, how you describe an action in a way that is sort of sealed off, so you know where it is, and you know where the repercussions stemming from it, and the consequences stemming from it, start and stop as well. Well, that puzzle in ethics, actually a sort of inward directed into philosophy, would be a great thing. If philosophy could lift its head, look out to the aesthetic world, and apply that debate about boundary conditions to objects as well. So that I have this question about, well, there's the object itself, you take a digital photograph of it, but is that in fact included inside what philosophy calls the boundary condition of the object, or is it some other kind of thing? And clarity on that can really help.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I repeat myself, ask a very, very quick question about objects?
Please, because we're going to lose lunchtime, so I hate to do this, but we should accelerate.
So I was at Amsterdam 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately I didn't get the right museum because it's so successful with the big line. I'll do it next time, so congratulations. But I went to the Van Gogh Museum, and we have this amazing exhibition, which I'm sure you know, called Van Gogh at Work, full of microscopes. And it basically completely kind of gets rid of Van Gogh mystery. You realize that the paintings you see, none of is how it used to be, all the colors change and everything. And I think for these museums, right, have become more and more with research centers and make it visible. We have a danger of becoming places which they deal with what they have in museums. You don't really know what it is because everything changes colors and materials. So how do you draw a line, right? Informing people what we have is actually not the real thing, because we're not always painting within months the colors will change. At the same time, if we reveal too much, then it's like people will be upset with us.
Well, it would be interesting to go to both, because we made a choice that we don't have microscopes in the and also because we feel that it's a bit, we wanted to present the objects in a way that you exhibition, you far more tell a story, and you can have one way in which you see an object, which is the story that you're telling. But in a permanent display, you want to give people the possibility to admire an object, some to dream away in front of it, others want to maybe have a very different approach, but you want to keep it open.
So I think that with that, we will end the morning session. I thank you all for coming, and I very much thank all the speakers.